Hello, fortune seekers. Can games be used for good? Today's guest believes that they can be, and he puts his questionable dance moves to work proving it. Ben Mertz works with Aeffect, Games for Good, spending time with the teens in Chicago to teach them lessons of life and values through board games. He tells us about how games can teach both good and bad values, shows us the games his students have designed, and he even lets me play his own metagame. So enjoy this conversation with Ben on today's episode of the Megamoth Studios Super Secret Podcast. Shh! Don't tell anybody about it. Hello, fortune seekers, and welcome back to the Megamoth Studio Super Secret Podcast. Shh! Don't tell anybody about it. I am your host, the geographically ignorant Joel Watts, and joining me today, as always, is
Danny, slightly more geographically inclined.
And today we have Ben Mertz from Aeffect Games for Good out of Chicago, Illinois. Ben, thank you so much for joining us today.
I am so glad to be here, and I am also very bad at geography.
Good. Okay. Well, maybe we could compare, like you got Illinois downwards and I got Texas upwards. Maybe we can meet in the middle. Missouri? Maybe?
Yeah, I think that works. Missouri's kind of in between.
I trust Danny.
I've driven it.
He's driven it.
Well, yeah.
And through his work, I would think that he probably knows the country's roots a little bit better than us.
Yeah.
Maybe. All right. So Ben, so Danny met you through TikTok. Danny, could you tell us, whoever would like to take this, I think Danny, because Danny, you have seen his content and you see it as an outsider. So what drew you to Ben's content?
So the first thing that drew me, I think, was Ben has like a crazy laboratory for printing games and creating games. And I saw it on TikTok one day and I was just drawn in, I wanted to watch it. He has a laser cutter and I'm watching him do laser stuff. And I'm like, what does this person have all this equipment? What are they doing? And, I started watching the content. I was like, oh, this person is definitely somebody to watch. And reached out and started interacting a little bit. And yeah, Ben's just an awesome person. So I think it was pretty easy to just kind of start a friendship over TikTok. But we haven't really done a lot of real-time communication. It's mostly just been interacting asynchronously on TikTok.
Why should we put any more time in between y'all's real-time communication? Yeah, Ben, tell us about Aeffect Gaming and why you have all that wild equipment.
Yeah, we do have a lot of equipment. We have a laser engraver, laser cutter, whatever you want to call it. We have a 3D printer currently. I've got a Cricut, which can do all the kind of CNC on paper or cardboard. And I've been slowly building our selection of small tools, from corner rounders to slicers and various forms of cutters. And the reason that I have all that stuff is because I'm trying to figure out, with the help of a bunch of middle school and high school students, how the gaming world can intentionally make games for good. I think there's a lot of games, especially in our current board game renaissance, that are doing a lot of good things. One of the inspirations for me personally, one of my favorite games ever, is Wingspan by Elizabeth Hargrave. And I consider that a game for good because you play a game and it's a good game. But if you're sitting around bored waiting for the next person to go, you get to read bird facts and bird names and where they're from and maybe a little bit about how they nest. And that's not the point of the game. It's not an educational game, but it is a game that helps you learn something more about the world around you and maybe gain more empathy for the world around you. So I've experienced games like that, and I think there's some games that do that on accident. I'm not saying Elizabeth Hargrave does that, but I'm wondering, how do we do that on purpose? And that's a lot of what we're doing.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I think we recently came across a game. It was a trading card style game, specifically made to look like Pokemon, but it reminded me so much. I think you're around the same age as us, Ben. Do you remember when you were a kid, there was almost those magazines that kids get that would just tell them about. Yes, zoo books. It was zoo books in card game format, and I was like, "This is so smart," because it's you're playing Pokemon but with an actual shark, and you get shark facts on it. And I've had similar ideas. I mean, there's a plethora of these style of games out there, but I think gaming is really good at showcasing history. The history of the world is a great thing to explore through games. So I almost like, maybe we'll bleep this out, but I think that doing that same thing, the Zoo Book trading card game, but do it for would be amazing, like actual real facts. Because Danny and I have been having a great time designing a card game inspired by history and inspired by lore, but we get to make it all up. And at the end of the day, it'd be almost even more cooler if you were playing a card game. It's like you actually get to learn about like the Napoleon's reign in Europe through it.
Yeah, and there's also actually a game that came out recently that does that really beautifully. It's called Her Story. And it has so much information about so many amazing women throughout history. And on the front, you just have like your game mechanics, like you need this to recruit that for your story or whatever. But on the back, you flip it over and it tells you exactly why this person is famous, what she did, and you get to learn something again. In between the turns, you're just sitting around, bored, not sure what to do. You flip it over and learn what this woman throughout history did. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's super cool.
Yeah, it's actually one of the games I'm really excited to have. I've only been able to play it once, but I'm excited anytime I find what I would consider to be like a game for good.
That sounds like a Christmas gift for me. I'm gonna be buying
put that on your list.
Yeah. All the wonderful people in your life could use that. But as Magic the Gathering Commander players know, there's a lot of downtime between your turns in games, so you might as well be, learning something while you have that.
Well, I'd be remiss if the episode went on too long without me saying hello from Curvin. Apparently, you guys can't say hello to each other directly. Is that a thing?
Yes, and actually, I'm gonna pause this. I'm gonna put a sticky note on the wall that says "Hi, Curvin."
Oh, let's see how long it can last, Ben. Let's track that throughout.
Yeah, let's test. I mean, this is Post-it brand sticky note, so I think it might last.
Not sponsored.
I did a little prep for this episode. I've got about 38 questions for you.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if we'll go through all of them. We touched on a little bit of it.
But yeah.
I might ask you 3. We'll see.
Hey, that's great. And I'm more than willing to like repeat myself. Any question you ask me, there's probably 5 different answers. So if you feel like I didn't give you the answer you wanted, you just let me know and I'll try again.
All right. Well, we're going to start with the hard hitting questions if that's good for you. All right.
Yeah.
What is the most important determining factor for pulling a great shot of espresso?
The most important factor for pulling a good shot of espresso. See, you made the mistake of asking me an espresso question, and espresso is the one that I know the least about. However, my understanding is the most important thing is going to be either your coffee or your water, the 2 ingredients. If we're talking about water, we're having to balance the pH and balance what minerals and controlling what minerals you're using, which actually I started doing with my brewed coffee. It's my really nerdy thing that I do is I make my own water. I start from distilled and I add minerals. It's super extra. If we're talking about coffee, it's the roast, it's where was it grown, what elevation was it grown in, how was it processed. You can do what's called a wet process, a dry process, all kinds of things. So the short answer is the coffee. The long answer is all the things that go into making coffee taste like coffee tastes.
What do you think like the difference is between, you have the same beans, but you have like the right process versus the wrong process? How different is that cup of coffee?
Yeah, it's going to be time, grind size, and for espresso specifically, it's going to be your pressure. So what makes espresso generally, my understanding, instead of just concentrated coffee, is that you're hitting somewhere around 8 or 9 bars of pressure. So there's brewers that can, like a mocha pot, that can brew an espresso style coffee, but most people that are really snobby into espresso would say that's not real espresso because it's not hitting the right like pressure, which is really what's infusing the gases, the oxygen, and infusing all of that stuff into the coffee to create the smooth texture that you expect in like an espresso shot.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Well, that sounds like the question of the week, Danny, and I actually have expertise on this, so I kind of feel like jumping in and answering the question of the week too.
All right.
Well, I used to work at a movie theater here in Austin, Texas that had a real espresso machine. In fact, I worked at two that had real espresso machines, and the difference is the first one didn't train us properly how to use it, and the second one did.
Okay.
And so I learned, like, that in learning how an espresso machine really works, I think I can boil it down to two main factors that your barista can actually control for, assuming they work at a real place and not Starbucks. And those two factors for your barista are going to be, one, the grind coarseness, because you can adjust that. It's sort of like the moisture in the air is going to be different every day. That's going to affect the taste. And you can't affect the moisture in the air, but you can affect the grind size, and that's going to create a lot of difference. And the second, like, just like Walter White and cooking his substance of choice, cleanliness. You need to be cleaning that machine every night properly. And you need to be kind of doing a soft clean throughout the day on it, like scraping off the portafilter and everything like that. Clean machine, clean pour, clean taste.
Yeah. And it's so funny because at least in like watching my dad as a kid drinking coffee, there was this idea with coffee that if you wash your coffee pot, you're going to ruin the taste. Or if you wash your thermos, you're going to ruin the taste, and you just like let it cake on and it just gets really gross. It's kind of like how we used to think about cast iron skillets. Like, oh, you just never wash it. And it's like, no. You can use dish soap on a cast iron. You can use dish soap on coffee stuff. Just rinse it well, because a clean coffee brewer is going to give you clean coffee. And slight argument against the grind size. When you're talking about the grind size, you're actually just talking about pressure, because the reason you need to adjust that, as I'm sure you know, is because if it is too coarse of a grind, it just shoots straight through. You get not enough pressure. Too fine, you have too much pressure, and you maybe don't get anything out of it. So I still say pressure is really important.
Well, I mean, like I would say potato in that sense, because like you are adjusting the pressure, but you can't. At least with my machines, you couldn't adjust the pressure of the machine itself. It was an on-off switch, so you have to adjust the grind size in order to compensate for what's going on that day.
Yep, and hit that. What is it? Generally, a 30-minute, 25-minute, 30-second, 25-second shot.
I was taught like 22 to 27, I think.
Yep. Okay. Mm-hmm. See, espresso is just something I do at work. I like to do more of my pour overs. My big nerdiness is because I roast my own coffee.
Whoa.
Yeah. So I brew my own water. I roast my own coffee.
Man, what is it like working with 32 hours a day?
It's pretty great. I just sit on TikTok, and it's like this glorified toaster oven that's like this big that I can sit out on a porch and roast about a pound of coffee. I have to do less usually because I try to get really light roasts really fast. So I roast like 300 grams of green coffee, and I save a lot of money on having really good coffee because it's only like $8 or $9 for a single origin, natural processed Ethiopia versus like $12 to $20 for the same amount. Yeah. But it's fun.
Cool. I mean, I'll have to give it. I've been upping my coffee game. I've become a pour over guy ever since my girlfriend moved in. She bought one of those, and I haven't gone back to the, regular brew, the drip coffee. So the next level would be also roasting my own beans.
Yeah, it's truly fun. If you like diving into like weird hobbies and understanding a little bit about it, then I think you'll enjoy it, because that's why I keep getting into stuff.
Do you not have any like coffee roasting TikToks yet?
No, I've not done any coffee roasting TikToks yet. I worked really hard. For a while, I was running my coffee roasting as like a side gig. It did decent amount of sales with that, but it started like petering off right about the same time I was starting to do the board game stuff. So it just hasn't crossed over. Right now I just roast for myself, and or if a friend wants coffee, I'll do that.
Well, I definitely would love to see some content around roasting coffee beans. That sounds super sweet.
Well, I'll do it. Now I have to, because it's on
somehow?
A podcast.
Yeah, you have to. That's the power of the podcast.
This is my coffee game prototype right here.
Whoa, coffee game.
I like the sound of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can show you sometime.
Cool. So are you from Chicago originally, or have you always lived in the area?
I did grow up in the area. I grew up in Indiana, but a part of Indiana that still considers itself to be part of Chicago land is what we call it. So I grew up on the tip of Lake Michigan in a town called Chesterton, which is about an hour away from Chicago, depending on traffic.
We know all about that here in Texas too.
Oh, yeah.
What would you say the gaming culture and community is like in the Chicago area?
I'm still figuring it out. I moved away from Indiana to Portland for 2 years and moved back during COVID. So
Oh, wow.
right now, my experience in the suburbs of Chicago is very much like in the post-COVID or the continuing COVID era, depending on what numbers you're using. And everybody socially is very, very different now. I have a friendly local game store that I love a lot and I get to hang out with, and they've helped me with all the Aeffect games. They've been the ones that have made the orders, sometimes doing custom orders. They host a lot of really cool events. I'm working on hosting more game nights. Obviously, Aeffect is part of the gaming culture, but being in the suburbs especially, I don't know much about the city. You know, I'm just kind of hanging out on the fringes.
On the fringes. Can you describe to us what the Western Springs, is it LaGrange? Is that how you say it?
Yeah. So,
What is that area like?
yeah, that's a good question.
Paint the picture.
Yeah. What it's like, I tend to describe it with a couple of key metrics. One, these western suburbs of Chicago are generally considered some of the more wealthy suburbs of Chicago. I think you get even more wealthy if you go into like North Shore, that kind of area. I'm still working on figuring out all the different areas and their stereotypes, but we're definitely in a very like pretty high income area, pretty decently expensive housing, pretty white community, not exclusively white, but predominantly white if you look at the metrics. And so it's a really interesting place to be because this is where you have a lot of the white progressives, but it's still a sundown town. And so you get to deal with a lot of racial history around the fact that most of these suburbs, like Western Springs, and I don't know this as a fact, but most of these suburbs exist because of white flight out of the city for a while. And so there's a lot of racial history in Chicago and in the suburbs, and in which suburb you're in. You start talking about south side of Chicago and all the white people get really scared. But that's something that you have to consider when you're thinking about this area. It's not something I'm an expert of. I'm just kind of an observer and still trying to learn through. But it's not like all the same houses, that kind of suburb. It's more historic suburb. It's been around for a long time, and the suburbs kind of bleed into each other. So where I'm at right now is Western Springs. Where I live is LaGrange Park. Where I drive to get between the two within 15 minutes is called LaGrange. And then you've got Brookfield just, 5 minutes down the street, and it all kind of just bleeds into each other. While still having like each tends to have a different downtown, but they all generally go to the same high school. I think there's like 9 middle schools that feed into the one high school that has 2 campuses. It's a dual campus high school. One in this, they call the South Campus, where the underclassmen are, and then the North Campus where the upperclassmen are. So even as this school system is doing their programming, it like you get different groups depending on where the club is hosted. Is that club in the South Campus? Is it in the North Campus? Is it somewhere else? But you get a little bit more diverse when you start diving into the school district itself, because it spreads a little bit further than Western Springs, a little bit further than LaGrange, and some interesting stuff in there as well. So it's with my work with teens, one of the big things that I observe, it's a very high achieving culture. And I'm decently new to this specific culture, so I'm trying to speak with a lot of humility and speak with a lot of saying that I don't actually know what I'm talking about. I'm just starting to learn. But even like the school system itself, which does a really, really great job in this respect, but their big thing is that they've found research that says if a student is engaged with at least like 2 after school on campus activities, they're likely to do better in school overall. So one of their big slogans for their activities is just pick two. Be a part of two programs. Now, this school has, I think they have a video game club. They have a Dungeons and Dragons club. They have nerdy clubs, but they also have their LTTV. They have a whole TV club that you get to show up and learn how to do videos and do all this stuff. They have obviously all the choir, all the music, all those things that you could expect. But you find students, in my experience, with schedules that you'd expect out of like a full-time job, adult or more. So my experience as a young person was I was bored a lot and I didn't know what to do with my time. So if someone came and said like, hey, I have this fun thing for you to do on a random weeknight, I'd be like, heck yeah, sign me up. I'm so bored. But these kids, I send them a Discord. I'm like, hey, who's available to play this game? I want to play test this game. And they're like, nah, I'm booked out for 3 months, my man. And so it's
they already got their Google Calendar set up. As,
yeah, exactly. I seriously think that's what they're doing, which is like genuinely smart if you're a family in this day and age to have a shared Google Calendar. But it's like, because so many of these parents are on the dual income, if not wealthy dual income side of things, they've worked hard to get the money they have. They want to see their kids work hard to have a similar style of life. And so that means that they're pushed really hard into sports. They're pushed really hard into things that they feel are going to pay off and will get them into a good college. And so one of the reasons that Aeffect is so important to me, there's a lot of reasons, but one of them is because it gives me an opportunity to hopefully get a handful of kids in a room and give them a minute to not have to achieve. And so I talk a lot about the stuff we're doing, the things we're doing, the work we're doing. And most of that is for the TikTok people and for the parents. But for the kids, it's, hey, how are you doing? And just pausing and giving them the space they need to breathe, whether it's playing a board game for 2 hours, or when we're doing like our print and play stage, which is the second third of our programming, we're just sitting and we're cutting things, we're printing things, we're laminating things. And then all of a sudden these kids have an opportunity to talk about how they feel about the world. I've gotten to hear about their take on various politics, philosophies, religions, because they have a second where someone's just willing to sit and to listen and not care what they're doing for me. They don't have to care what they're doing for me. At least I work really, really hard to make sure that they know, I don't care what you do for me. I'm going to ask things of you. I'm going to see if you'll do things. I want to give you as many opportunities as you could possibly want. But if you're overwhelmed and if you feel like you can't handle it, I want this to be a safe space where you are enough, not just you are what you can do.
Why do you feel like you were so compelled to provide that for kids? I mean, it's super powerful, but what inspired you personally to make sure that there was space like that for these kids in your community?
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of a way to answer that without sharing like what I do during my day job. I work at a church. I'm sitting in the Presbyterian Church of Western Springs, and I am a youth director. So I run like youth events for teens. And so literally what I get paid for is to make sure that teens have a safe space. And actually the church I work for, one of the reasons I really, really love being here, they care so much more about knowing that there are adults showing these kids that they're loved and that they're cared for and that they have a place to belong than anything about faith or religion. Like they could probably care less sometimes whether I talk about religion at all, as long as I'm showing up to like a football game or I'm inviting them out for coffee and we're talking about life, because that is what it's all about. And that's what my job is all about. And that's all informed obviously by my faith and how I interpret my faith. But also like that's a little bit just who I am. I just love to observe the people around me and do everything I can to include them in whatever I'm doing if they want to be included. I love working together with people because I love feeling like we're doing something together and we're achieving something together. I really don't have any interest in just like succeeding on my own. That's so boring.
Yeah, 100%.
I'd much rather like,
fellow travelers with.
Yeah, exactly. I'd much rather just make sure everybody's doing okay. I don't know. That's a little bit just how I've always been, and a little bit what I'm paid for.
When did the program get established?
Yeah, the program got established because I got a grant opportunity pretty much, it would have been almost a year ago. I got the opportunity to apply for a grant, and we started Aeffect in the spring semester of this past school year. So we've only really been doing this for one semester, and we're going into our second semester. And when I started that, we were meeting in one of the rooms of the high school, meeting at 7:00. Kids could just show up. It was a place that they knew, that was safe to them, that was familiar to them. And we started out just playing board games, and it started evolving into these print and play times and these times of inventing our own games, whether it's an idea I had that they helped me flesh out or an idea that they had that they kind of took to at least like a good prototyping stage before we ended. So we're really just in our second school year now.
What do you view as kind of being the greatest achievement of the program to date? Like, how do you look at that?
Yeah, there's a couple different lenses. The first is going to be in that making sure that there's a safe space for the students in my area, especially given this very consumeristic, this very you need to be doing context. And one of those is there's like a very distinct day in my head where I showed up, I had a bunch of little like things we had to cut out as we were doing a print and play, and we're all working and the kids are just talking. The students are just talking. And they're just now finding out at this point in the year that like I work at a church. And so they're going, oh, this is my problem that I have with the Christian faith and the damage it's done to the world. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. And we'll keep talking about that. And they'll be like, and here's how I feel about these politics. I'm like, wow, that sounds like a really important point. And they'll be talking about the school. And it just was such an awesome opportunity for them to just kind of share and to have a couple adults, because it was me and another youth director at the time were there, and they and I were just sitting there and affirming these kids. And that was one of the most successful moments I've had as like a person who cares about the students in my community, was that day. If we're talking about like making the games for good, or making games in general, some of the biggest achievements is that I currently have 2 copies of games invented by students.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So this one's one I did a TikTok on recently called Victory. And in the TikTok, I shared that technically this game cheats because it's not really a game for good. It's just a good game. So...
Hey, that is for good, though.
Yeah.
The game. Around playing Cards Against Humanity or Monopoly. Come on.
Right. So This is a great game, but it doesn't necessarily have like a deeper meaning or a deeper purpose. It's just really beautiful and really fun. But this one is from a student who is hopefully going to be continuing to do work on it. And this is based around fashion. And you get like, it's like a set collecting game where you have a certain aesthetic and you're trying to collect the clothing items that fit your aesthetic.
It's almost like a thrifting game.
Exactly, yes. And this student is super on with like all of the fashion, does a lot of their own clothes, does a lot of their own like costumes when they're cosplaying, and just really is like rocking the fashion game anyways. And so for them to kind of come up with a card that really defined different styles of clothes, different thrifting styles, through their lens was really, really cool. And they just did the designs. Currently, the designs are just from like Canva, but...
What is that?
Canva?
Yeah, it's that. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with Canva.
Yeah. No, Canva is something that everybody needs to know about. It's a free online program that allows you to do all kinds of different digital design stuff. Mostly, it's going to be like various graphics or image stuff. So if you ever need to come up with like a promo for like, if you need to make an Instagram post, if you need to make a Facebook post, Canva is a great free resource to do that. It's not as customizable as something like an Adobe Illustrator, but it comes preset with a lot of graphics that are free, comes preset with a lot of templates that are free. Super important resource for anyone who's trying to prototype a game because it's free.
Yep. Great asset for small business as well.
We love free.
Yeah.
I do want to say that I wish I had that that kid's game, that teenager's game for fashion when I was a kid, because I didn't know, color matching, style matching. I just took what I got and made a mess of myself. So that would have really helped. And that's actually one thing that, let me get on a soapbox for a second. One thing that I think games can really do is like actually make you appreciate, like look at something more deeply and appreciate that there's more nuances to it. If you gives you a chance to look into a world that you haven't experienced before and like actually see it stretched out and see all the different shades, if you will. And I think fashion would have been really good for me because it's only been recently that I've learned to rock the fashion.
Yeah, yeah. And I try not to fall into any version of, hating on social media, because I don't hate on social media. I love what social media is doing. But even if you love what social media is doing and you don't think it's ruining this generation, like some people might say, there is something to teaching our brains to take their time on a topic and to slow down for a minute and to just kind of reflect. And I think that board games in general do that. Like, I think everything, if you broaden the definition, that's the word I was looking for. Every game, if you broaden the definition, can be considered a game for good because it creates an opportunity for you to be social. It creates an opportunity to build community. It creates an opportunity for critical thinking. So I think gaming is just a really good thing, is what I mean to say, for young people and for old people and for in-between people.
I think that's definitely a great point about taking time to reflect on what's in front of you, and especially your comments about social media. I do think people dismiss social media. They don't understand the value in it. I mean, I was having a conversation just yesterday with somebody who still thinks TikTok is primarily about, dance trends, and they don't understand that. I mean, it's an incredible tool for meeting people, for sharing ideas, for educating yourself, for forming relationships. There's so much going on the platform.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to dismiss those things.
You don't have to talk about our personal conversations on the podcast, between us.
Well, we didn't have that conversation yesterday. That was a couple of months ago. All right. We talked about accomplishments. Yeah. What about setbacks? What kind of setbacks have you faced with the program? And how did you overcome them or plan to overcome them?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest setback I encounter over and over and over is always going to be scheduling, right? I live in a community where most students are either overscheduled or are not plugged in enough to know about Aeffect. So it's really easy to have weeks where maybe I don't have anybody show up because they've got a sports event or they've got some sort of Boy Scouts thing they have to go to. And so those are kind of the biggest setbacks in general, because it really bums me out if we have a week where nobody can show up. And I don't blame them. I think I want to make it clear, I don't blame the students for this. I just reflect on what we can do better in the future to make it something that's like worthwhile to them, or to advertise it as something that's worthwhile to them. The other setbacks is a lot of why I just started this semester having the gatherings here in this church building, is because when we got to the print and play stage where, we have 3 stages. I haven't explained this yet, so I'll pause to do this. In the Aeffect programming, we have 3 stages. The first stage is for like a month and a half where we just play games. And I have a basic Google form that they fill out asking about mechanics, asking about if there was any meaning in the game on purpose or not on purpose, and asking if they thought it was fun. And they're just evaluating the games that they're playing. Then after we've done that for a few weeks, we move into the print and play stage where we are going into this wild niche of board games that I didn't know existed until I started researching into this grant project, and printing games that we get digital files from, it's like $3 or $5 or free, depending on where you're looking and what you're getting. And trying to do our best to make a game that feels as professionally, as quality, as good as you possibly can. So that's using like linen paper versus just printer paper. It's using a spray adhesive instead of just like raw paper. And then we finally move into the making our own games, which is hopefully involves us using the stuff we learned from evaluating like mainline games or mainstream games, using the skills we had in doing a print and play. So eventually when we have a great game idea, we can then print our great game idea and have something in our hands tangibly that we made both physically and as an idea. So those are kind of the 3 stages we go through. And the first stage is the easiest for me, right? I just show up and bring a bunch of board games. I had a big box that basically just lived in the trunk of my little Prius. And I would show up on a Monday night to the school. I'd load it up. I'd unload it. The kids would grab a game. They'd play it. I'd pack it back up. I'd go back to the car and I'd drive home. Once we moved into the print and play stage, all of a sudden I had so many materials and so many little niche tools, whether it's like a little one like this big, like a corner rounder, or it's a big one like this big, like our Cricut was at the time. And there was no way I was going to be able to carry all of that stuff into a classroom for 2 hours every week and then bring it back out. And so I had to do some prep work. I had to try and invite the students to spend an extra hour during the week in the church to use those materials. And that was a pain because of scheduling. And that was a huge roadblock for me, as I really was hoping we could be working on these print and play games during our 2 hours together rather than kind of me doing it in the background and then them just being like, oh yeah, that looks decent.
So many hours.
I know. And I'm like, I mean, I liked it. I genuinely enjoyed doing the work, but it's like, the point was that you would do this, not that I would do this.
Yeah.
And then you ran into a similar thing when we were designing our own games, and a little bit different. I don't think I gave enough time for them to design their own game. Now, when I asked them to design a game, I'm pretty clear that I want you to just have one mechanic. I want you to just have some sort of deeper meaning that makes it like a game for good, and I want you to make it fun. Those are the 3 things I would tell them. Do not include more than one mechanic if you can help it, because that is too much work for what we're doing right now. If you want to come back next year, add a mechanic to your game. If you really liked your concept, felt it wasn't fleshed out, come back, add another mechanic, change the mechanic, go deeper into the graphics, whatever. But for now, it's one mechanic, one meaning, and make it fun as well as you can. But even with that, that was not enough time for most students to really put the effort in to be like, what is my idea? Now, some did it, right? Like I have 2 in my hands right now, and there's, I think, 2 more out there that didn't get fully produced, but were in someone's brain as like an actual game. But yeah, if we would have given ourselves more time for that, that would have been much better. So now I'm going to be speaking day 1. Hey, be thinking about your game. Be thinking about what you're going to do. Start planning now.
It's sort of like the teach to a game. You have to tell people, like they always say the first thing is who are you, and the second thing is how do you win, and then you need to like have a teach up front where it's like this is what we're doing, this is what Aeffect is about, and this is what you should be working towards by the end. You should almost map out the program like a game.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, but it's like a free-form game, right?
Yeah.
Because in the same breath that I'm saying you should be a part of Aeffect because it gives you an opportunity to design your own game, I'm also saying, and if all you ever want to do is show up and play a board game, you can do that too.
Yeah, exactly. Because I was just going to comment that playing games, you could, if you actually sit down and like look at the games with people wanting to design them, at the very least, you could probably become a really solid play tester and somebody who can give feedback. And if you can actually like process those thoughts and apply them to playing games, you can take that with you to processing other complicated issues and applying that, problem solving. I mean, that's always in my opinion, that's what games are about, especially when you're a younger kid. It's all about like learning systems that you're going to need to take with you when you enter the workforce, when you become an adult. You have to, it's almost training in some ways.
Yeah. And thank you for saying something about that, because that is another reason why Aeffect needs to exist for me, because it's not just those like critical thinking skills that you learn from board games. Those are a thing. That is awesome. But with Aeffect specifically, I'm really trying to speak to these high achieving students and let them know that they can make an impact on the world or on their community or on their friends doing whatever it is they do in the world, right? Like, you don't have to be a best-selling author to change the world. You don't have to be a politician to change policy. You don't have to X, Y, and Z. Whatever you do, if you do it with a purpose and if you do it with a mindset of wanting to positively impact the world, you can do that. And board gaming is just kind of essentially our case study for that. It's me saying, hey, you can do something fun on purpose in a way that helps the people around you. And hopefully one of my really big goals is that they pick that up and realize, oh, I'm an accountant. How do I do that in a way that positively impacts my local community, my national community, my global community? How do I live my life as a person doing that? And I think that games can teach us something about that.
There's all kinds of ways to infuse meaning in our life. And I think making other people conscious of, oftentimes it's just a matter of being intentional about what you're doing, who you're doing it with, why you're doing it. And you can project meaning out into the world if you just take the time to identify what is needed and how you present yourself to the world. So I think that's incredibly awesome. And, that kind of rolls into my next question, which is, what do you see as being the appropriate role for meaning in games?
Yeah. I think my answer is I'm still figuring it out. Mm-hmm. I mean, anytime I talk about Aeffect with someone, I try to paint them the picture of I believe there's some sort of in between an educational game, right? Educational games already exist.
Right.
They're like good educational tools because they're following a mechanic. They're moderately fun. Those already exist. I'm not trying to make educational games. I'm not interested in making educational games. But there's got to be some sort of in between purely educational game and like Clank Catacombs, which is just like a game. It's just a fun game, or a difference between that and Magic, right? Magic is rooted in fantasy, but it doesn't necessarily teach you something about the world you live in, at least surface level. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
I mean, I would say that in an abstract way, it might teach you about resource management, about long-term planning, about like, knowing when to hold them, when to fold them, and when to spring your trap. That said, I mean, yeah, you're not going to learn history, or at least our history, through Magic directly. You'd have to almost like do a secondhand research on like the history or fantasy culture that they, examined in order to take inspiration for the latest set. But yeah, I think I think of mechanics as like if a good mechanic in a game will translate into like, this is how you would do that in the working world with other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think all games need to have like a deeper meaning or they're not worthwhile. That's not what I'm trying to say. I just think there's a lot of games that we play that teach us something, but it's not doing it on purpose. So it might be teaching us something we might not want to learn. Like Jared, if Jared ever listens, do you follow Jared on TikTok? Jared X2, Jared Bendis?
I don't think so.
You should follow Jared. He's a professor of game design in Ohio.
Oh,
okay.
Now I might sign up for TikTok.
Yeah. This is why TikTok is amazing. I just stumbled upon Jared randomly. He is a professor of game design, and he does a lot of great content on TikTok. And so he knows a lot about the history of Monopoly.
Yeah.
So if he listens to this, which I don't know that he will listen to this, he will yell at me because I will misrepresent Monopoly right now. That's all I'm saying right now. But one of the examples I give is today, from our lens as people right now, what does Monopoly teach you?
Well, I mean, if you want my
To
take
stay
on
away
it,
from people who want to play Monopoly.
yeah, I would say that it teaches you that eventually, monopolistic capitalism will, make everybody else go broke, and one person will get rich and own everything.
Yeah. And I would say essentially the same thing, but I would phrase it like Monopoly teaches you that it's okay to profit at the what's the word?
Misfortune, suffering.
Yeah.
Expense.
Essentially, Monopoly allows you tells you it's okay to benefit on the backs of other people, or in a zero-sum game, which life generally isn't actually, but Monopoly is. In a zero-sum game, you want to be on the one on the top, and you want everyone else to be on the very bottom. Otherwise, life's just not worth living.
Yeah. I guess.
And
wow.
What would you say something like Risk teaches you?
I haven't played it that much.
Get 'em
Risk.
dead. Yeah, I mean, it's all zero sum, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, and Monopoly, it feels like it's a much worse game for being zero sum because I mean it's so grindy to even try to win that game. Like,
yeah.
I have traumatic feelings just thinking about playing a full game of Monopoly. So
yeah, well, with how you and your brother play games, I can imagine what it must have been like at the Ayyub household playing Monopoly.
I don't think I've ever completed a game of Monopoly. I've played it for hours, but I don't think I've ever seen the end of that game.
But I would definitely agree that was a great way of stating it because you not only took it from like you took it from like what as a player what do you feel playing the game and what and that shows how games could potentially be bad, and so that contrasts very well with your games for good. This is a bit of a diatribe just really quick, but there's a podcast I listened to called The Dollop that did an episode on Monopoly and the history of it. So I'd almost be interested in talking to that professor. What'd you say his name was again?
Jared. Yeah.
Jared. Talking to Jared about their interpretation of the history of Monopoly and see if he agrees with it or has his own take, and that would I think that would make an interesting topic. But diatribe over. Please go on.
Yeah, I just mean to say, the point that I'm taking into Aeffect is that the games we play, the media we consume, whether it's reading books, watching TV, whatever, it's already teaching you something. I'm just trying to make sure that I personally, and hopefully these students, and hopefully as a result, now that I'm doing TikTok, other game designers are actually paying attention to, wait, what is this teaching? And am I okay with that being what it's teaching? Because I'm not okay with having a game that teaches you that it's okay to profit at the expense of other people. I'm not okay with a game that teaches you that world domination is an acceptable way to solve your problems. And even though that's not the intention of those games, I do think that is a message that we might subliminally take from playing these games over and over and over.
Have you ever had to have a conversation with a student participant who presented a game that you felt like the meaning was challenging and you wanted to have a discussion about what they meant by it, or?
Not yet. They haven't given me too spicy of a take yet. I'm waiting for it. I'm ready for it. I can't wait.
Wait till you get a little Voldemort who creates a game that I don't know. I don't even want to project what the game could be about, but you're just like, oh wow, I might have to report you.
All right, I've got a few rapid fire questions for you here, all game related. All right, awesome. So first one up: what are elements that every good game needs?
Depends on who you're trying to market to. I mean, if you're marketing to TikTok, it's got to look beautiful, because if it doesn't have a beautiful table presence, it's not going to blow up on TikTok.
No, it's not. Okay. What's the most underrated game of all time?
For me, the most underrated game of all time is a little dice game called Farkle.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of this?
I've heard of it. I've never played it.
It's a game that my family was obsessed with. And I think it's literally you have like 6 dice and all you do is do a rolling mechanic like you might see in King of Tokyo. Have you played that game?
I played
once.
I played King of New York, I think.
Yeah. So same, but the dice rolling mechanic where you roll the dice, you keep some, you roll the rest, you keep some, you roll one more time, you keep them. Farkle has that same kind of mechanic, and it's a very push your luck game where if you roll all usable dice, you get to re-roll all of them, and you're going to get your numbers and your points are going to go higher and higher and higher until all of a sudden they drop and you lose, and it is the most devastating game ever. So yeah,
Okay.
I love Farkle.
And on the flip side, what's the most overrated game of all time?
I mean, the easy answer is Monopoly.
The fact that you can still buy that game in a store is a travesty.
Well, because they're being smart with their business model, right? They're not just selling the game, they're selling the game and they're customizing it for X state school. They're customizing it for X hobby. And so they're really capitalizing on essentially Monopoly is not just a home staple game. I mean, it's a staple of a home game. It's what all people know. It's also like a souvenir in some ways.
Yeah, yeah.
So it makes sense why it's so big, but
They've run it dry
nobody
in terms
like
of marketing.
likes Monopoly.
No, you put it on your shelf and it's something to look at, because who wants to be like, hey folks, you know how Luke Skywalker can defeat the Empire? By building a lot of businesses and collecting a lot of rent. So that way he can topple the Empire through capitalism.
I know. It's like those crossover episodes on TV that nobody asked for. That's kind of the late stage Monopoly.
Yes.
Current stage Magic the Gathering in some sense.
Oh,
Topic
although
for
I was
another
excited
episode.
to see the Lord of the Rings Magic cards. I thought that was so cool.
That's cool. There some of the sets are long in waiting.
Yeah.
I think that Lord of the Rings was. I don't know how I feel about Doctor Who.
There's Doctor Who Magic cards. That's so cool.
Yeah.
They're on their way. And then what else? Final Fantasy is on the way.
Which is ironic because
Just
Final
everything.
Fantasy supposedly has a really good TCG game that just came out. So it's almost like cannibalizing themselves. And that's
Yeah.
like, when you have a big company, it's like, one branch of your big company is like, we made a really good TCG. People are saying it's better than Magic. And then the other side of your company is like, why don't we just sell all of our property to Magic? And it's just like, what are you doing? My take, just so you know, Ben, like why it's almost sour to get Lord of the Rings and Final Fantasy at this point is they started their first brand deal was with The Walking Dead, and I would say it's when The Walking Dead was well past ripe. And
No, it was definitely well past.
it's like if
that's
they
a rough
started
call.
with Lord of the Rings, everybody would have been like, this is amazing. But I feel like they've kind of poisoned the well on this whole thing from the beginning by starting there, doing what was it, Godzilla. And did they do Transformers or something else like that?
There's some Transformer action. There's some My Little Ponies action. There's some Stranger Things action. There's a lot of action going on.
Yeah.
And so do you like just add those into your deck, or do you play like, this is my Lord of the Rings deck, bring your Lord of the Rings deck, let's play together? Or do you just like add Aragorn into your deck?
Well, it depends. Do you like to
forget
win or having fun?
Lord of the Rings is legal. I don't know if it's only modern legal back or if I don't think it's currently in standard, but I don't know. I haven't been following competitive Magic for a while, but
Okay.
it is as long as they're black border. I mean, I think they're at least legal in the Eternal formats.
Okay.
Essentially, you're going to put a couple Lord of the Rings cards into whatever deck, and so you're going to have just Samwise is going to be fighting next to a goblin,
Or
That's wild.
Rick from The Walking Dead.
or Rick
That
from The
sounds
Walking
like
Dead.
it sounds like a great way to write a really bad fan fiction.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I can't wait to see the future of Magic the Gathering multiverse.
What is your favorite game mechanic of all time, Ben?
Ooh, what is my favorite game mechanic of all time? Honestly, I can't answer that question. My favorite game mechanic is not my favorite because of the mechanic. I just love seeing a mechanic used cleverly. If I had to pick one, I would pick social deduction because I have a decently big family. I have 5 younger siblings. So anytime we get together, I bring a big collection of games, right? Like I've got all these games now, and like half of them will be social deduction games where we'll be playing like Coup, or we'll be playing Snakes or Chameleon or whatever it is, and just like screaming at each other, gaslighting each other. It is the best just like standalone mechanic for playing games with people that you care about and want to pretend you hate.
Yep. Okay, that's cool. What do you think is the most underused game mechanic?
I don't know that it's fair to call this underused, but I really like when it is used, so I'm going to call it underused, and that's going to be modular board. So essentially when your board changes every time because you're placing it down, like Betrayal on the House on the Hill. Clank Catacombs does that, where the original Clank doesn't do that, and it makes the game so much better. according to me and to Nicholas Sparkman. So it matters.
of Apothecary.
I'm
Yes.
assuming Settlers of Catan is the ultimate example, or at least the most known example of that.
Yeah, that's a good example of that, where you have a game that is so replayable because you're not just opening one board.
Yeah.
You're putting it together either turn by turn, or in the context of Catan all together, but you're shuffling it before. So I think that makes games so much more replayable, even though it might take a lot of work to set it up and do it well. But I want to be careful to say every game should have that, because I think it starts to look like in movies when you start to have one trend in an action shot. We had oneers were a big deal in movies for a while. If you had an action shot, you'd do a oneer, and then every movie had a oneer.
And everybody's like, oh my God, they did it.
Right. Yeah. But now if you see a movie that has a oneer in it, you're like,
yeah.
Okay, whatever.
Was that necessary?
Was this necessary? Yeah, and it's not even a good oneer, or the action actually isn't good in the oneer. And so I don't want to say every game should have a modular board, but when it makes sense, put in a modular board, because I will replay it way more times and have way more fun doing it.
Impromptu question: what's your favorite oneer of all time?
I mean, Kingsman did it first, and they rocked that. That was so much fun.
Ben, I have a correction for you, or at least I got to get on my soapbox. I think the movie that really set off the modern era of oneers was Children of Men. Have you seen it?
Wow.
I don't think I've seen that one. I'm like a very wannabe movie buff. I don't actually know anything about movies. I just watch a couple here and there and pretend
you're talking to two would-be filmmakers. Children of Men is amazing. Clive Owen at his best. It's a science fiction dystopia. If you don't know the storyline, it takes place in a world where people just stopped getting pregnant, or women stopped getting pregnant. So it's 15 years later, there hasn't been any babies born. Everybody's just sort of just in complete misery and a funk, and then Clive Owen gets basically recruited to help the first pregnant woman. This woman who's pregnant and nobody knows why, and he's helping her try to get to scientists who can study what's going on and see if they can start rebooting the human population. But of course, this world is in such disrepair, so everybody wants a piece of her, and he has to basically travel through kind of third world conditions across Europe that are turf wars and things like that. Wonderful. Many one takes, actually. There's at least 3 notable one takes in that movie. So it's if you want to see it when it was good, it's almost like Nirvana. It's like the Nirvana of one takes. It just came out of nowhere, rocked the world, and everybody since then has been trying to mimic it.
My favorite is still the opening shot to Boogie Nights. I feel like the opening shot to Boogie Nights is just majestic filmmaking. Okay, back to games. What type of games are not available enough at this point in time? What could we use more? What type of game could we use more of?
I think that this is a trend, so I can't say that it's not going to end up here, but I want this trend to keep happening, which is these very nature-based board games. I love that because it's such an easy way to just immerse us in some of the amazing things in our world, whether it's nature, whether it's birds, whether it's mushrooms or whatever. But I think the more we can have games that are beautiful and show off the beautiful sides of the world we live in and let you dive a little bit deeper into how complex the world we live in is, I think we're going to get more people empathizing more with our ecology, with our world, with what's happening to our world and things like that. So I want to see that trend keep going with games like Wingspan. And I think Mycelia is one I saw on Kickstarter really recently that I'm really excited for. It looks so beautiful. It's all centered around mushrooms.
Is it still available to back?
It's not even open on Kickstarter right now. I think they start October 1st. I think it's Stonebreaker Games. I don't know for sure. Send me a text and I'll let you know.
All right. I'm in.
Yeah.
I would really like to see that kind of thing, sort of like Wingspan, but for trees, because one thing I feel like I'm too ignorant on is the variety and differences in trees out there. And I think trees are some of the most wonderful things on this God's green earth, so.
Yeah, and I agree. And so I hope that we keep getting that trend because it fits well in the TikTok aesthetic of games, right? It's beautiful. It has great table presence. But if we can continue that, even games like photosynthesis that doesn't really teach you anything about trees, but it's focused on trees. So you're spending time actually realizing, oh yeah, I should care about trees in the world, you know?
Oh, you see that?
Yeah. Well, that's going to have to get blurred. If Will chooses to
Will,
show
just
you,
cut
he's gonna have
away.
to
Just
figure out
cut
how to
away.
blur.
I'm receiving
Show us footage,
a
Will.
call from he who shall not be named.
Before we get too derailed here, I do want to touch on, before we move on to our final segment, which is Game of the Week, I do want to touch on TikTok a little bit. So what made you start, what made you want to start making content for TikTok?
Yeah. The reason I started making content on TikTok is because I wanted to see if it was something that I could use to promote an event and or to add legitimacy to an event. I think a lot of the times in like business, you need a website, not because you actually need a website, but because it adds legitimacy if people can go online and Google you and go like, oh yeah, that's a real place. So I was wondering if you could do some of that adding legitimacy, getting some following on TikTok as a way to promote Aeffect. So I got on there. I started doing a couple videos. We were at the stage where we were designing cards. So I would have questions every once in a while, like, how do you infuse meaning into a TTRPG? I don't know enough about RPGs. So what do you all think? And was kind of just using it as a platform to show off what we're doing, just be curious and find what was in board game TikTok. Learned really quickly that TikTok is horrible for promoting a localized event because it's algorithmic based, right? It's not at all location based, a little bit more now that you can put in your location, but like I'm connecting with people like Danny over in Texas and Danny's not going to come be a part of my event.
Yeah.
Not at the drop of a hat, at least.
Right. Not without significant planning. So TikTok is different from like Instagram and Facebook, where you could just be on it and you would gain people in your like actual in-person gatherings. And so very quickly realized it didn't do what I thought it might do. But right about that time, I stumbled upon so many cool content creators like you two, like you both, like Danny, who's doing the content on TikTok. And realizing how cool of a community something like board game TikTok specifically is. I don't know if other areas of TikTok have this, but board game TikTok has such an amazing, just warm presence of so many people who just want to support each other. Like one example that I thought was cool recently was Bear Mountain Camping Adventure. Have you been watching their TikToks?
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember seeing their very first TikTok when they were just like, hey, we're here, we're promoting more. And then it felt like overnight, everyone on board game TikTok was like, follow, like, comment, share, save. And we all just like pushed it so hard. And they got backed. They got fully backed in, what was it, like 4 hours?
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
They
stupid
were
fast.
successful for sure. Yeah.
And I'm not saying that it's only because of board game TikTok, but board game TikTok is so good at just hyping each other up and getting excited for each other. And I fell in love with that. Started running into people like Seppi Yoon over at Fight in a Box who were willing to like send me prototypes or start sending Aeffect some games. And that's kind of turned into why I do it now, is because now I'm here for the community. But also I'm here because I'm learning about an industry I really didn't know much about until I was on board game TikTok. Like I really didn't understand how board games become board games. But now I'm starting to learn that because I'm watching people that are doing it. Like One First Games is a board game publisher on that, or Terrible Games. I love watching their process on there. Andy is also a really cool guy who's funded a game. But just like seeing these creators showing their process has been so cool. Seeing the cool games people are doing, the innovative games people are doing has just made it so worth it. So now I can show up and be like, what do y'all think about this? And I'll get some actual answers from actual game people. And that's so valuable to my teens, right? Like I can show up to a meeting and they'll be like, I don't know what to do about this game. And I'll be like, okay, let me, this is a TCG, let me call Danny, or this is a party game, let me call Kervin, or, this is this, let me call this person, because now I'm building this community of people who just want to see this program succeed, and they're just always hyping each other up, and I love it.
Great.
What kind of content do you enjoy making the most?
Thirst traps.
I have not yet done a thirst trap.
You haven't lived, sir.
I am not sure
Maybe
that
when
I
we start
ever
doing
will.
that, coffee roasting.
Yeah.
Different kind of thirst trap. That would get me.
Yeah, me
I
too.
will say this now. If I ever do end up meeting up with Matthew Ryan on TikTok, Envyborn Games, he does some golden thirst traps. So if I ever meet up with him, I'm just going to make him teach me to do a thirst trap, and I'm going to do at least one if I ever connect with him. But that's the only chance. That's the only time I'm ever going to do a thirst trap.
Keep our fingers crossed on that.
Yeah. So Matthew, if you're listening, hit me up. Let's do some thirst traps.
100%. I would like to see that. I would be envious for sure.
Yes. But my favorite content to do is I really do love my Mechanics Explained series.
It's a good one.
Because it helps me actually internalize it, right? The best way to learn something is to teach it. I really, really love getting to do that. But also I am starting to find that my new favorite thing is just getting to be part of like the hype train. So what I want to be able to do in the future with TikTok is I just want to be able to like either be sent games or buy games or whatever. And if I really like them or if I just want to promote it, I want to be able to just say, hey, this is super cool. Go support this person. Anytime I can do that, I'm living my best life. Like, I love the ability to stumble upon something I never would have found before and just like hop on and be like, I love this, because I do. And I mean it. Like, I'm never lying on a TikTok, but I'm so thankful for the community, for people who have sent, games, or for both of you who sent me files before you were actually like sending files to people. But like to be able to get a glimpse into people's process, like play testing for Trash Cult, those sorts of things, and just hype them up. I want to do more and more of that. Like, that's my goal, is to do more of that.
Awesome. Nice. All right. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I think we should give it over to Game of the Week.
Yeah, well, actually, I would. I'm not sure if you want me to ask this before or after, but I think I've kind of came up with a question based on a couple that you had already asked.
Yeah. Why don't you? Is it a good final question, or is it a?
How about why don't you ask your question? It's a thoughtful question. It could be a good final question.
All right. How about
you know what? Will could decide, and he could decide to move this to the final question.
Yeah, Will.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right. Joel, ask it, and if I feel like we ended on a good note, I'm just not even.
Okay. Well, Danny asked you a few questions about mechanics earlier, and I thought, through talking, I think actually might have synthesized maybe a more precise question for like the way that you look at games. What is a mechanic that so thoroughly has like a narrative backbone, like reinforces the narrative of the game and the meaning of the game? Like, is there one example that you can think of that you would call your favorite, that actually performs, that whole game for good? This mechanic reinforces good, what you consider good moralistic behavior that reinforces the game's themes and message.
Yeah. I don't know that I can with confidence say for sure what that is, but one that comes to mind is the one that I just posted about earlier today, which is set collection. And what I love about set collection is it lends itself really well to whatever theme you put at it, right? Like Her Story, a game I mentioned I consider a game for good, that is a set collection game. One of the games that I've come up with, or that Aeffect has come up with, is based around composting, and it's a set collection game. It is so easy to make meaning out of set collection because you just pick a theme and collect it. But not only that, and I also shared this in the video I posted, set collection, because it's generally more visually cued, allows for those moments around the board game table that I'm really, really looking for too, where I can actually talk with you and have a conversation because my mind isn't thinking 500 turns ahead. My mind isn't thinking, does this synergize with this? Or can I sneak this in? Or can I, do that? You're just like, okay, I need that. That's there. I've got that thing, moving on. And you can actually engage in a conversation around the table, which is one of the reasons that board games are so important, and why we do Aeffect is to get kids around the table practicing social skills until all of a sudden, even when the game's gone, they're comfortable and they're having a good time.
Awesome. I love it. All right. I'm going to ask one more question.
Love it.
It was a good question, but I'm going to go back to the Aeffect program to close this out here on this interview. So if everything goes according to plan, Where would you like to see Aeffect 6 months from now, a year from now, and 5 years from now?
Yeah. 6 months from now, we'll be hopefully finishing up this session. We'll have a couple new games that are starting to get printed that are either in like an alpha or ones that were in an alpha last semester and now are starting to be actually at a point where they're very playable and very successful. We'll be celebrating what those kids have done and promoting what those kids have done, both on TikTok and in person. That's 6 months. What were the other milestones? Thank you.
1 year and 5 years.
In 1 year, if all goes well, I'd love to see if we can do Aeffect without me specifically. Because I think I can say truthfully, like a lot of what Aeffect is who I am and what my personality is. Like my ability to include kids and make them feel safe is a huge part of it. But how can we set up this programming in a way where it doesn't matter necessarily who it is that's running it, but you're going to have the desired outcomes? Can you do it in Indiana? Can you do it in Texas? Can I give you essentially like, here's what you do, and you can go run an Aeffect gathering all by yourself and actually be somewhat successful in your context? That is what I'd love to be thinking about in a year.
Nice.
Yes, I am having a conversation with someone who might want to try doing Aeffect. So we will see if that happens.
Well, 5 years. What does 5 years look like?
I think 5 years is when I'm realistically hoping that we've gotten to the point where we've maybe either started or are thinking about or have successfully crowdfunded a game that's come out of Aeffect. Whether that's, a lot of the games that we've produced, I think we have 3 of them now that like started as a brainchild for me. I brought to the group, they play tested, they added feedback, or it's one of the games that the students just create and they realize, oh, I really love game design and I really want to put more time into this and I really want to put more money into this. And I will say, yes. And how do I help? And if we can get them or one of the games that we worked on collaboratively to the point where we're kickstarting to do an like actual professional print run, that would be an awesome milestone for 5 years.
Awesome. Ben, thank you so much for enlightening us on what you're doing with the Aeffect program. I think it's incredibly important work. I think there needs to be more intentional meaning infused in the world. And I think teaching young people how they can do that in their everyday life is hugely important. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Yeah.
And thank you for making highly entertaining TikToks as well. Yeah, grateful.
I make TikToks. It's up to you whether they're entertaining.
And where can people see those TikToks, Ben?
Yes, I am on TikTok as @Aeffect, AEFFECT_TT. You can also find me on Instagram, Aeffect_TTG. And we also have an Etsy account. So I'm going to plug that Etsy account because right now I have 3 print and play files you can buy for $5 each. You just get a PDF and you can do your own print and play with cardstock, and you can end up with Aeffect the game, which we're about to play. You can end up with Compost Champion, which is the one I highlighted on my TikTok that I posted today on a Wednesday. And you can end up with a game I called Robots First Garden, which is a kind of a spin on Go Fish that's really good for younger people, but is a creative association game where it's Go Fish, but none of the cards match. So you have to come up with something that matches and be really creative about how that matches in the theme of a garden. So
for some reason that reminds me of like Go Fish meets Guess Who. I don't know why Guess Who comes to mind.
Yeah, very Guess Who as well, where you're like, do you have a bug? Do you have something green? And it's really great for younger kids, but even when I played it with my high schoolers, they just got super into the bit. And because the pitch that I gave to them was like, all right, humanity has ceased to exist. They're just extinct now. All that's left is the robots we created and their artificial intelligence, but they still have other animals that they need to feed. And so they have to figure out how to garden. And so you all are going to use your artificial intelligence to learn how to garden by creating these associations and matches. And they'd go around the circle and be like, do you have a picture of the deceased? Like it's like a picture of a person holding berries, or like, do you have one of the deceased in your hand? Or like, do you have an arachnid in your hand? And they'd be like really weird and robot-y about it, and they just committed to the bit, and we all had so much fun with this game that I meant to be like for 5-year-olds.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I really
People
want to
should
play
definitely
that
check
one.
it out.
Yeah. So Joel, are you going to be playing Aeffect the game?
I think that's the plan.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to this. Actually, I meant to ask you a question about it earlier. So, can you explain the game for our audience before we get into it?
Yeah, I'll show it to the video and I'll try and describe what's going on too. So this is a game that has 3 decks. You have a mechanic deck, which just has a bunch of mechanics that you might see in a game on the back. You have, let me sort it out, a meaning deck, which just has different things that maybe we should be tackling in our games. These are just things that I came up with that I didn't think were too politically charged. And then
I don't know if you know this, but everything is politically charged these days.
Well, yes, everything's politically charged, but at least it's not politically charged in a way that people will look at it and be like, I don't want to be a part of that.
I gotcha.
Yeah. And then you have a curveball deck. And so this falls right into the way that I'm encouraging the students when they're first coming up with their first game. Pick one mechanic, pick one meaning, and make it fun. That curveball is making it fun. So the way that you play this game, if you're playing just by yourself, you can play it by yourself. You'll just draw one of each. So you'll have a mechanic, you'll have a meaning, and you'll have a curveball. And you get a couple seconds or a minute to think about a game that you might create that involves all 3 of those elements. It can involve other elements, but it has to involve those 3. And then you get 30 seconds or a minute to pitch the game. If we were playing it all together, we would all end up with one in front of us, and we would each have to pitch our game, and we would each vote on who pitched the best game.
Okay.
Which would you rather do? Do we want to just have Joel play by himself?
I mean, I'm
voting for Joel with multiple curveballs.
Okay.
Multiple curveballs.
How about just multiple rounds? Let's see how many I can do in at the set time limit, like 3 minutes or something.
Ben, you and I can rate it thumbs up, thumbs down. Give him. Okay.
Oh, I see. The tables have turned, and now I'm the one who has to come up with the games for the game of the week. Is that how it goes?
Well, that's the game. The game is coming up with a game.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm just going to warn you. You might not like my answers. Okay, let's go.
All right, Joel, your mechanic is going to be take that.
Okay, so that's sort of like a sorry mechanic, right?
Yes, a very much a sorry, like, haha, I got you mechanic.
Haha, I got you. Okay.
Yep. Your meaning is going to be recycling. So take that, recycling. Okay. And your curveball, let me shuffle this real quick, will be vintage.
Ooh.
Wait.
So you need to take that game, which involves recycling and is vintage in some way.
Man, like that's the curveball really is I had a game up until the curveball.
I know.
Yeah, that's the thing. All right. So take that recycling vintage. I guess there has to be, I mean, I don't like to think of spite because we are trying to make games for good, but take that always has a spite mechanic to it. So I'm trying to think of how I could do that.
Keep thinking. Danny, do you have access to like a stopwatch?
Oh God.
I've got a stopwatch. How long
do I get? A minute?
We'll give him like a minute to think about it. Okay. And then we'll set a timer for 30 seconds. And he gets 30 seconds to pitch this game to us.
Okay. So I imagine this to be a thrifting game because thrifting is kind of like recycling already. So take that mechanic, I guess the overall mechanics are get the most stylish, like most worthy clothes for your price point. The take that mechanic is going to be actually kind of like sort of pseudo polite and sort of negotiating, but forceful negotiations where you have a clothing item that you kind of don't want, and somebody else has a clothing item you do, and you can like be like, well, this would look so good on you. I'll trade you this for that, and try to get a higher value for yourself by swapping it. But you do have to kind of talk the person in, like because they're probably it might have a set collection where it's like you're trying to make an outfit And so, you're saying take this for your outfit, but I'm going to take that for my outfit. And I guess the ultimate goal, is to end up with like a higher value outfit than you traded in, and you can trade in between rounds. Yeah. It's like it's like you've worn the clothes, now you bring it back and you get paid for the clothes, and that's your budget for your next round.
Yeah, I love it. And I love the way that you were able to resolve the recycling and the vintage just by turning it into thrifting.
Yeah.
That was clever. That was good. Although you got more than 30 seconds to pitch, so technically
I did.
you cheated.
Oh no,
Danny, you gotta stop him.
Well, I mean, I wanted to see where he was going, because usually the longer I let him talk, the
politeness
he gets. So,
well, not
the opposite.
Yeah, if anything, he's giving me the rope to tie my own noose. Curvin did that to me. You'll see it soon enough, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right,
are we ready for another one?
Yeah,
I'll do one more.
Okay. You've got your mechanic is going to be social deduction.
Okay.
This is going to be a good one.
Very good at social deduction games.
Good. So this is a social deduction game. Mm-hmm. Dealing with mental health.
Uh-oh.
So here's your news.
Yeah.
Mental health social deduction with pro wrestlers.
Oh, you just hit his hot spot. He loves pro wrestling.
All right.
I wouldn't say as just a disclaimer, I am starting to learn to enjoy pro wrestling. I am nowhere near a expert at it, but okay.
He's an expert and he loves it.
Okay. Social deduction, mental health, pro wrestling. All right. I guess give me the 60 seconds to let me know when I have to stop thinking.
All right, your time's up.
Oh. Okay. All right. So there's a lot of ways you could take this with pro wrestling. There's a lot of mental health issues there, but I'm thinking what you want to do is have your persona versus your regular self, and it's like a mystery of who is falling too much into their persona. Now their persona is like dementia or something like that represented in a way, but it's essentially like who has fallen too far into the pro wrestling thing, who it can no longer separate themselves from the kayfabe. And, you're trying to figure this out because they could become a danger to you and the other wrestlers. The more wrestling matches you go, the more likely somebody is to be injured.
I can't hear that thing about being injured. It was after the time. And that was probably the thing that was going to sell me on the idea. So.
Oh, no. All right, guys.
You still get my thumbs up because I love the concept of doing this social deduction around the persona and the personas winning. I think that's a really cool idea.
2 thumbs up from Ben, 2 thumbs down from Danny, and Curvin is the tiebreaker, and he just texted me 2 thumbs down. So, I'm sorry.
Too bad.
So you did get Aeffect's approval.
Oh,
well, I'm really generous. So
I could play this game. This reminds me of like Balderdash. This is kind of a game that I could just a game for creatives by creatives. You could just play it all day long.
Yeah, this game is on Etsy right now. You can do a print and play. Do this on your own. I think it's a really great thing for game designers who just need to juice up their ideas. I did it every day for a week, a couple of weeks ago. Actually ended up with an idea I'm trying to flesh out and come up with a decent game around.
Okay.
And we will get to work on that pro wrestling mental health game.
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm super excited to play the Luchador game.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I will say, tease like down the pipeline with Megamoth Studios, there is a social deduction game coming that I'm like really jazzed for. So I would love to be able to get you in on that one, Ben.
Yeah, I would love to be a part of it.
Awesome. All right, Danny, did you have anything else, or did we want to play another round?
No, just wanted to thank Ben for coming and hanging out with us and sharing this evening and telling us about the program.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to share what we're doing and continue to get to know both of you. I'm excited to see where X Seekers of Fortune goes. I am excited to finally learn how to play a TCG, and it's going to be a good time. I'm super proud of it.
All right. Well, awesome. What are you doing next Tuesday? You should come out to Tuesday Night X.
I know, that would be so fun. If only we weren't in Texas. I don't know. It's hot enough in Illinois right now.
Well, it's something we do on the Discord.
Oh, you do it on Discord?
Yeah.
Okay. It's virtual.
It's a virtual event. So you could come out and I could show you Danny or I could show you how to play, or one of our other players could even show you.
You need to send me info is what I have to say to that.
I will send the invite very shortly.
Good.
Yeah. Cool. Well, if that's, I mean, I think that wraps everything up. Thank you so much, Ben, for joining us. Aeffect Games is his organization, and they're doing great things out in Illinois and hopefully across the country soon enough. So be on the lookout for a local chapter of Aeffect Games. My co-host has been Daniel Ayub, and I have been Joel Watts. And as always, I'm here to remind you that you must start somewhere. So why not here?